In a lot of ways, Christmas cards feel very ubiquitous, and you can't really imagine what Christmas would be like without sending cards to all your friends and family. But as with a lot of the details around Christmas and special things that we do, they really are a big Victorian invention. Here at the V&A, we have a very special relationship with the history of Christmas cards. The first ever Christmas card was sent by our first director, Henry Cole, back in 1843. He commissioned a designer called Calcott Horsley to create a design for him to send to his friends around the Christmas period. And as you can see, it's a kind of very festive, jovial scene of people getting together and eating and enjoying a Christmas feast. Our idea of what Christmas is really comes from the Victorian idea of Christmas. And it's a melting together of a lot of different cultures around Western Europe and North America to create the idea of what is a typical Christmas. All these details were really still being merged together at the time. So when Henry Cole released his Christmas card, they were very costly to produce, but as the Victorian era went on, innovations in technology and printing meant that there was a real kind of high and low market. So there was some very cheap things being produced and bought for just a penny, and then some more expensive, more ornate designs. And that really encouraged people to go out and send them. If we take a look at a couple of examples I have here, this is a postage stamp of an envelope for a 1 penny stamp to send quite a small card. And here we've got this lovely box that's sending a much more ornate card. This is an example of the kind of higher end cards that might have been sent. So really, people across classes were able to access Christmas cards and send whichever ones were in their budget. Prior to the early 1800s, envelopes weren't really a thing, and that might be a bit of a surprise for some people watching this. Typically, they just folded letters, used a wax seal and sent them on to people. Here we have a few examples of envelopes created for the Christmas season, with some nice little detailing. Greetings cards also became big collectibles at this time. And as we can see here, some people would kind of keep them together in an album. You'll see a lot of things that are very typical to the Christmas season, like robins, but also things that are a bit unexpected, like a couple of chicks here bursting out of an egg. Here it says New Year's greetings. So they're thinking of eggs as a season of rebirth, that your new year might be, as opposed to a typical symbol for Easter. And then we have some more odd ones that we maybe can't quite explain, such as this lobster of some kind snipping at a small child with compliments of the season. They really were just trying a lot of things out, and I think companies were also looking at, what was going to make their Christmas card product different from other competitors as well. So that's another kind of motivator for some of these slightly more unusual themes. The visual language of Christmas was really still evolving at this time. And some of the things that you'll see coming up quite a lot in some of our cards might be quite unexpected.
Victorian Christmas cards contained a lot of the imagery that we think of today as traditional. So we have lots of images of robins, we have wintry scenes, lots of snow, we have ivy, mistletoe and holly, and we also, of course, have Father Christmas. Father Christmas starts to appear on Victorian Christmas cards from about 1870, but his image isn't quite fixed yet. So sometimes we see him in his trademark red coat and hat and his long white beard. But in some of these other cards, you can see here he's wearing brown robes, and here, a particularly mischievous Santa is wearing a red hood and a green coat. He could appear in lots of different guises, but he's always portrayed as a jolly fellow, presiding over the feasting, the gift-giving, and the general merriment of Christmas. We don't know his exact origins, but he seems to arise out of a combination of Christian and pagan tradition, and his portrayal here, wreathed in ivy and holly, may speak to his pagan connections with nature and with the land. A lot of the Christmas traditions that we still have today were actually introduced by the Victorians. So these new Victorian traditions obviously began to appear on Christmas cards as well. We can see here over Father Christmas's shoulder, we have the Christmas tree, popularised by Prince Albert when he had one in Windsor Castle in the 1840s. We also have the Christmas cracker, which was invented in the 1840s as well. And here we have two lovely cats fighting over a Christmas cracker.
With Henry Cole's first Christmas card, the subject is a feast, and feasting has remained a popular theme of Christmas cards till the present day. And certainly the kind of later Victorian period was no exception. Here we have a group of children feasting around a table. Perhaps where this differs from Henry Cole's imagining of the Christmas feast is the human faces on the Christmas pudding, which we see in many, many different guises. This Christmas pudding is doing Ring-a-Ring-a-Rosy with some mince pies. Here we have a group shot of all the kinds of poultry you might have during the festive season. A group of Christmas puddings singing at your window, complimenting the season. A child looking expectantly at a Christmas pudding. We see this all over, the human food, the human animal, the human inanimate object. This is a very common trope in the late Victorian period. Most people in Victorian era did not have access to meat every day, or if they did, it was a subpar quality of meat. This varied across class, but generally for most people, there was a lot of foods they only really had access to at Christmas time. If we look at this pair down here, we have a pineapple and champagne, and this card celebrates foreign visitors. So these are real kind of luxury items that most Victorian people would not have been able to afford, but they may be able to afford them at Christmas time. And here we have its counterpart celebrating the domestic foods that people enjoy at Christmas. A big slab of roast beef and his lovely round partner, a Christmas pudding. Despite what you might think at first glance, this is actually a loaf of bread with a knife in it, and the knife moves and gives out a little Christmas greeting. Looking at these in the 21st century, sometimes some of the humour and comments and slang doesn't really translate. So when this says, "May Christmas be just the cheese," I'm not quite sure what that's meant to be, but I expect it's supposed to mean, "May Christmas be great."
Children are one of the most popular themes in Victorian Christmas cards, symbolising the joy of the season, the childlike innocence, and quite a lot of the portrayals are quite nostalgic, harking back to an earlier, maybe pre-industrialised time. They're often depicted doing wholesome activities like having a snowball fight, riding on a swing, or actually posting Christmas cards. We have this really interesting example here. It depicts a young girl selling holly, so showing the slightly darker side to Victorian childhood and the child poverty that existed at the time. It may have been a charity card, it may have been them signalling their sympathy with this issue. One of the interesting things about Victorian Christmas cards is they were often a flat piece of paper, not folded. They have the image on the front, a name on the back, and that's all we have. We also have images that tend towards the surreal, like these children's faces growing out of daisies. We have a wide variety of animals on the Christmas cards, and one of the Victorians' favourite things seemed to be to anthropomorphise them. So we have a family of robins dressed in their bonnet and hat and scarf. We've got kittens selling oranges at a market stall. We've got these kittens running in a race, possibly doing some acrobatics with their family. We have this dog dressed as a postman with disturbingly human-like hands. We have some rabbits playing a lovely game of ping pong. And probably most bizarre of all, we've got this group of insects, including a stag beetle, playing cards. So we might not think of these animals as being very Christmassy today, but there was clearly a market for images of them, just as there is today with sloths and llamas.
Victorian admirers of Christmas cards tended to view humour as very kind of lowbrow and not really worthy of the art form. These tended to be more popular with younger people, people who would send them to their friends, but they weren't necessarily the ones that were collected. They weren't necessarily the ones that people were sticking in albums. So if you hate puns, I'm afraid I don't think you're going to enjoy many of these jokes. Here we have a very popular clothing garment at the time, a muff for keeping your hands warm. And so this one says, "I feel I muffed wish you a warm and comfy Christmas." In the 1880s, a chap called Angus Thomas started producing Christmas cards, all generally around puns and humour, often using everyday items as part of the illustrations. For example, this one looks at a table. "May your friends be hospitable, your circumstances comfortable, your ventures profitable, and nothing lamentable ever befall you." So this one's a bit more simple, it's got some sewing needles on it, and it says, "'Tis needless for me to say, I wish you joy this Christmas day." I think clowns have a bit of a bad reputation now, and a lot of people find them quite scary, quite sinister. But in the Victorian period, they were generally seen in a much more jovial way. They were seen as kind of playful pranksters. So here we have the clowns cutting a bit too much off on this gentleman as he goes to the barber's. And here we have a cheeky thief of a clown stealing from someone's basket with a police officer in pursuit. Pranks and falls and people having misfortunes occur to them was kind of popular with other themes as well. And so we have this chap here who's been caught in the sleet and snow, maybe not having the most merry of Christmases.
Throughout the 19th century, there were lots of different publishers producing Christmas cards, and they were all competing with each other for customers. So they had to constantly come up with new designs, novelties, things people had never seen before. Another way that publishers could introduce novelty into their cards was by changing the shape. Traditionally, the cards were small and rectangular in shape, but from the 1880s, there was a huge variety of shapes, as you can see here. Again, we have things that we might not traditionally think of as Christmassy, so the chick inside the egg, a ladybird on a lettuce leaf. Here we've got a pair of egg cups and spoons, and in another example of Victorian humour not quite translating, it says, "And if 'neath matrimony's yoke you mean to enter soon, may Cupid, joining in the joke, provide you with a spoon." A brush with Christmas greetings. And my particular favourite, this muzzle with small dogs in it, saying, "I wish you an unmuzzled happiness in the new year." So as well as interesting shapes, we've also got some more elaborate novelty cards. We have this beautiful card depicting the Great Exhibition of 1851. So you start with the exterior of the Crystal Palace, with children skating and throwing snowballs outside. But then, as you go inside, you can see the interior of the Great Exhibition, full of people and hung with garlands and a Christmas banner. It's amazingly small and delicate, and the detail of it is amazing. So you might wonder why I'm not using gloves to handle these objects. At the V&A we generally don't wear gloves to handle paper objects, and these in particular are very fragile, so you need all the dexterity of your fingers in order to handle them safely. Triptychs were another popular form of card, so ones that folded out in 3 sections. So this is an elaborately decorated cabinet with these beautiful, delicate mesh in the windows and garlands of roses. This is an example of a type of card called Hold to Light card. So on the back of it, it has a thin paper which is translucent when held up to the light, and so you can actually see there are pinpricks of the train carriages. You can see the sky behind and the light coming through the viaduct. And on the back, we can see the patent for this type of card. And this one actually is a lovely example because it has a personal message on the back. It says, "To my dear sister Maggie, with best love from your loving brother, Bert." Out of all the cards I've looked at, I think this is probably the most impressive. It must have been sent to a very special person. So at the back we've got a nativity scene, and then this amazing layering of angels, a Christmas tree, some holly, basically encompassing all of the Christmas traditions, both religious and secular, all in one. We might not send as many Christmas cards nowadays as the Victorians did, mainly due to the rise of digital communication, but you can still see the innovation and creativity in cards that are produced today. And I think there'll always be a place for Christmas cards to send to people you love, to show you're thinking of them, and to celebrate the joy of Christmas.